Hey everybody, welcome back to Visual Novel Book Club. I'm your pal Slow Beef. With me, of course, my good friend Devious Vacuum.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
My good friend Oren Ronan.
Hey.
My good friend Turbo C.
Hello.
My good friend Jim.
Hi, y'all.
And we're back with Door 5, I believe, of the House of Fata Morgana. Wait, House in Fata Morgana? I always do that.
You'll get it eventually, don't worry about
it. I probably won't.
Buckle up, folks.
Buckle the fuck up, as they say.
We sure did a whole chapter.
This was a thing.
Alright, Chapter 4, Redux. Chapter 5, The Fifth Door, 1099. It opens with the title, The Cursed Mansion. We open with Giselle leaving the capital.
Which is Paris, by the way.
Yeah, it's a real beginning of Elder Scrolls type of situation. But the camera fades in as she's like in the back of a horse-drawn cart.
Yeah, it's the Skyrim old thing.
She's talking about the Grand Pont, which is actually the old bridge that led to Paris. So it is Paris. It's definitely Paris.
Cool. Interesting.
And so it's Paris in 1099.
So once again, they don't actually say what the places are, but they give you enough in to figure it out.
And everybody's French, so I mean.
Yeah.
And it's the Dark Ages.
It definitely is the Dark Ages.
Yes, absolutely is.
I don't personally have a lot of historical anchoring to this particular point in time, so if anybody's super into this time period, feel free to jump in.
I will. 1099.
Yeah, tell me.
1099 is the First Crusade. It is the conquering of Jerusalem. So there are holy Christian knights out there doing a bunch of crazy stuff as dictated by the Pope. And that comes in handy for later.
And what else? The main thing I think is what were other people's lives like during that time? I don't know.
Oh, the Dark Ages wasn't really a good time to live.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't sound like it.
Why didn't they simply just live in a different time? Why didn't they just go to the Light Ages? I would just go where it was light.
Yeah, why did they not simply live with progressive values? I don't know.
Well, we got a narco-syndicalist commune going on over here if y'all want to join.
Yeah. We'll get to the communist utopia village. So Giselle is being driven, she's being escorted, I guess. She's getting a ride out of the city. She was banished. She's like, the coachman won't talk to me because to him, I'm a criminal. And, he drops her off at the mansion that she's looking for without a word, so she knows that she's being sent here. And as soon as she is dropped off by the coachman, who immediately leaves and, doesn't talk to her and is just bye. The story plays out the same as we saw in the Black Mirror earlier, where Giselle enters and it's dark and she feels her way around, ends up at the chapel, meets Michel. He warns her that the witch is me.
I think, wait, correct me if I'm wrong here, but he's even more of a dick this time around, isn't he?
Well, he said in the original Black Mirror scene, he was like, don't criticize my lifestyle, which was so fucking funny, and he says it again this time, which I love.
It plays exactly the same, and then it continues though. We don't see the.
Huh. I must just be misremembering then. All right.
Yeah, it's like if someone was like, D-Vac, why do you just spend all your time playing video games with all the lights off in this room, with no one else around, and I say, don't criticize my lifestyle. God.
Valid
anyway.
Response.
Yeah, so we continue. This chapter has both of their perspectives. So Giselle's perspective has pink roses, and Michelle's perspective has blue leaves. And we switch back and forth between them throughout the time. In the beginning, it's just, I think, so that we can look at both of them. Because after that Black Mirror scene, we switch to Michelle's perspective, and we see a portrait of Giselle. and when she was, I guess, alive. And in this, a lot more than her portrait reveal in the last chapter, she's very clearly the maid. Like, she looks the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just with a haircut.
Yeah, she has short hair, and she doesn't believe she doesn't believe him when he says he's the witch. She's like, she's very like bubbly and positive and like trying to make a good impression and be like upbeat, and it kind of grates on him.
He immediately says that he's not literally the witch, but he lives in this mansion, so he's the witch in that sense. Yeah.
He's like, whatever's gonna get you to leave, okay?
Yeah, he says a lot of shit like that. I have powers. Oh, no, I don't, actually.
Yeah.
What's scarier? It's that one.
And also, like, her dialogue takes on a real, like, modern tone in at least this translation. I don't know,
Yeah.
Lauren, is that the same thing in Japanese?
Yeah, it's not. It has like modern elements to it. I thought the localization went too far at a few points, but it's not. She talks like a modern girl, even in Japanese.
Sure.
They all do. They just maybe using fancier words from time to time.
Yeah, he almost seems like he's very like proper but still modern.
Did you say like this chapter maybe was like a hard, or maybe the game in general was like a hard?
The entire game. So it's not. During dialogue it's usually okay, but when they're not doing dialogue, when they're doing descriptions, I feel like the authors just sat down with the thesaurus and picked the most difficult word they could find for every concept. so I have to sit down with a dictionary because I've never seen this word in Japanese before. So
Wow.
it takes me so much time to read this.
They got you, huh? Of all people, wow. So, but in English, it's all modern. Like, they didn't pull out any old-fashioned words that were particularly difficult.
I was like half expecting Giselle to just say, "Hey, what's up?"
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Especially because she's
very
so
casual.
excitable. Yeah, like, she's so happy all the time. I think it lends itself to, like, sounding more modern as well, just because she's so high energy, and we imagine people in the past not being positive about anything, especially in the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
I mean, they are called that, so to be fair.
There's one instance near the end of the chapter that really made me think they shouldn't have translated like that.
Yeah. But there's also like comparing this to the first chapter, which is very like Shakespearean, but also like kind of like formalized in tone, like dearest brother and dear sister, like that kind of stuff in the first one compared to this. Like this one, they're just like, we're just gonna fuck it all in. This is very none of this is very formal. This is very informal dialogue.
Sup, bro? There's a witch in this bitch, this piece.
God.
Yo, so I got dropped off by this cabbie, and I said, "Yo, home, smell you later."
Oh my God. Giselle's like, this is a story about how my life got turned upside down.
Yeah. But then I think where it loses its impact is, so spoiler warning, and also content warning, I guess. So they started to use the word rape in English. And in Japanese it's always more like he violated me or something a little more prosaic.
I would like to know, what was the cultural significance of rape in 1099? Like, would someone have had that kind of reaction, or would it have been like, no, it was all her fault?
I mean, in like all these fictionalized stories that, I mean, this happens, it's always this sort of reaction, but of course that's all fiction, so I don't know. And I doubt there's much documentation of these types of incidents.
And Michelle and Giselle, like, I think the casual language does help between them of, like, showing that they're, like, living their own life together outside of the rules of society. Like, they're living with their own values separate from whatever, like, cultural values that they might have been raised to have.
Mm.
And they have more humanistic values, in the end.
Yeah, and even, like, much later in the chapter, Michelle is even just like, let's forego any of this act. You and I are on equal footing.
Yeah. But before that happened, a lot of shit happened.
Mm-hmm.
We're back at the beginning.
A lot of not good shit.
Giselle says to Michelle, "It's a pleasure to meet you, master." And because she has been sent here to be his maid, She initially explains that she initially lies and says like, oh, I was your mother's maid and I screwed up and I got punished, so now I'm banished here. And, I think she says that it was his father's decision to banish her here. Michelle is like surprised at this. He doesn't like his family. It's clear from the beginning. He doesn't want to have anything to do with them.
He seems so nice, though. No, I'm kidding.
And all I wrote, so then from Michelle, a lot of their interactions are like this, and I think they can be summed up by Michelle is upset that no matter how mean he tries to be to Giselle, he ends up being nice to her.
Yeah. It's like, as an unusual tact for a male role in House of Fata Morgana, he is mean at first.
Yeah.
But has a harder goal. Didn't see this one coming from anywhere.
Yeah, and he says shit to her, and then she, twists it around and makes it positive, and then he's like, no! And she's like, well, thanks, that's so nice of you. And he's like, no, I'm mean. I'm a mean guy.
I just gave you a sick burn. Respect the burn. You don't tell me I said you compliment. No.
Michelle is so childish, though, especially, compared to our previous boys.
I'm giving you a noogie, not combing your hair.
Yeah.
Right, they spent 10 years alone in a dark mansion, so...
Yeah, but he's, a little too into it.
Yeah, he needs to step up his burn game.
So Giselle works intentionally to try to get him to open up. In the previous chapter, the white-haired girl was just kind of, existing, and she was just, by her own natural kindness, got him to open up, but Giselle is, very intentional. She was like, no, I'm gonna make this relationship good, even if I have to force it. And she starts cleaning the mansion, and then, great line that I love, she is like, why doesn't he open any of the windows? Maybe he's a vampire. Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel extremely acknowledged.
5 chapters in, we finally get the word vampire?
Yes, so she's worried that, she's like, oh, maybe he's a vampire. But Giselle, throughout this whole thing, she tries to clean in the dark, and, she's very positive about stuff, and she's, spunky. She's got chutzpah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's not just spunky, she's smart. She understands,
Yeah.
she has a background which has prepared her to think a lot more about her situation than just oh, this master's mean, oh well.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing about Giselle, and not just necessarily that she was particularly educated for her time period, but she's just smart. She's a smart person.
Yeah. So we get the book scene again, with the falling books.
Yeah.
And this time we learn that she actually knows how to read, which surprises Michelle.
Yeah, so he's suspicious, because, it wouldn't make sense that a maid would know how to read. And she says some stuff to herself. She is like, I'm a servant now, a servant, which what implies that she was not previously. She has not, always had to do this. And we get the book scene from Michelle's perspective as well, and he explains everything. And while he's explaining about the 1 book a month thing, Giselle counts all the books, and she's like, oh, there's 121 books here. That means 10 years in 1 month that you've lived here. And he's like,
We didn't have math at this time period. How did you know? No, I'm,
Stop paying attention to me!
You multiplied, witch!
Yeah. And, she asks if he was alone the whole time, and he says, truthfully, he had not always been alone, in his, inner monologue. He says, you know the answer, but in his monologue, inner dialogue, he says, I've not always been alone, but she didn't need to know that, which I assume, refers to the people he's murdered that have, been killed here or something. But who knows what that means.
Yeah, we don't get an answer for that one.
Or is he referring to the witch? I don't know.
Yeah. After the last chapter, it does seem to imply that he has murdered people straight up with his curse.
Yeah, but he doesn't really have a curse.
Right, but we don't know this now.
So maybe he just murdered people.
maybe it was a series of just unhappy accidents,
Unfortunate events.
Yeah.
Okay, if you like. I meant more things maybe somebody came over to say hi and the books fell on them. And it was all, and that just,
no.
he's his curse is he's very clumsy. Fatally clumsy.
Oh no. And the most anime of curses.
Unfortunately, in this curse, he doesn't fall on her boobs. He just falls with a knife in his hand.
Well, he does do that too.
Yeah, he does do that.
Later in the chat, yeah.
Spoiler alert, he does that.
So, Michelle explains that he also says that he came to this mansion of his own volition, but he also lies, like, to her, like, to make, like, if there's a scarier lie that he can tell, he'll do that to try to, like, get her to go away, or, like, get the action that he wants.
Which he never gets.
She never understands that he's trying to get her to go away. And just the book that Giselle picks up to read is the same Nobleman's Diary from Mel's chapter of, like, complaining and stuff.
Yep.
And and she's like, "Oh, this is interesting," and she's like asking him about what kind of, like, books he likes, and he's like, "Oh, this is boring," and she's like, "Oh, but, like, we get to know about, like, what this person's life was like, and isn't that interesting?" And Michelle's inner dialogue has a line, "There was nothing more exhausting in this world than being emotional," when talking about Giselle. I love that. This whole, like, dynamic, I just really enjoy.
Yeah.
The whole thing of, like, the really, like, grumpy, like, introverted Michelle who's, like, actually, like, wants to be nice but won't let himself, and then the, like, really effusive, over-the-top Giselle who's just very empathetic and, like, too empathetic, too kind.
Yeah. It's two different ways of coping with similar, like, circumstance, which is, like, getting shut out of things either makes you, like, turtle in or get over the top out.
Yeah. I like them a lot. I like their cute little romance scenes. So Giselle resolves to keep on working on getting Michelle to open up, and at some point she asks him, like, "Is anyone else here?" And he says, "No one alive," like a fucking goth.
Ha ha ha.
And it just bounces right off her, and I love every time that happens, because that's exactly what he deserves. He tells her to eat a rotten parsnip.
That's pretty great.
When she asks about the food, and there's it's leading up to the real version of that whole, like, loot box scene. She's like, he doesn't like parsnips, as we learn. And so there's some that are uneaten, and he's like, "What? It's fine, it's food." And she's like, "No, it's not! Are you kidding me?" And she's like, way over the top, like, "You need to eat good food." And they get the box of food delivered, and she also asks, "Can we make requests?" And he's like, "Yeah, I guess." Let's see. And she thinks about how she could request things to start a garden outside. And in addition to there being food in the box, there's also a painting. And Michelle suddenly gets very upset, but he relaxes when he sees it's just a landscape painting. The landscape painting that the man was in that talked to us and gave us a key.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he says, he's, like, annoyed, and then he's like, and then he relaxes, and then he says, "If it's not of that it's not of that girl, so it's an improvement." So before we have seen paintings of the white-haired girl, so we can assume that was the paintings that were sent to him before.
Yeah. Which, again, this makes you wonder, like, what else is going on there, and just, for the rest of this chapter, this is not addressed.
And but it's basically his mother. So we know that his mother was sending him paintings, and that was a painting of that girl. They have an argument about how he's not obligated to tell her anything, and she's not obligated to be here. This is the main crux of their arguments, which is anytime Michelle doesn't want to do anything, he can just be like, "Well, you don't have to be here, and I don't have to tell you anything." And he even, like, uses his rank to be like, "Look, you're my servant. I don't have to do anything to you."
See, though, he didn't do stuff like this last time, though, right?
No, because that was fake and made up.
Yeah.
Right. No, but yeah, that's why. Okay.
He's a lot meaner in this. He's very mean.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Totally.
In this
he
argument,
touches her.
Yeah, he grabs her and she gets really agitated and pushes him away, and that's when he starts to think that she really is, like, fraud and hates him and just here for some other reason.
Yeah, and the fact that he grabs her also tells us that the curse from the last chapter is not real. There's no magic in this chapter.
Yep. But they definitely, like, the dialogue and the writing emphasizes that, like, that's a moment, like, oh no, he touches her, this isn't the same thing, but also, like, it's a moment for her too. Like, she's not comfortable with this.
Yeah. And Michelle even says, like, well, why are you upset? Like, this was your wish to be here. And she's, like, really indignant about that. Like, who would wish for this? Like, obviously she's being punished as well. But
she doesn't say it out loud, but...
Yeah. He can't see things past his own suffering to see that she is suffering as well.
Yep.
So he's suspicious, and let's see, Michelle asks Giselle what she did wrong that got her sent here, because she said, like, oh, you messed up, you know, what did you mess up? And she, like, doesn't want to tell him. And we learn that Michelle's family's last name is Bollinger.
Yep.
I'm sure that there's a way to pronounce it that's French.
Probably with a more French pronunciation, yes.
I would guess Bollinger, but, like, that's complete guess. I have no idea.
Bollinger?
I think they do have the hard G, but I don't think they end on a hard R.
I think it's just balls.
Bollinger sounds really funny to me because
I think, but yeah.
Welcome to the Bollinger family.
Somebody tell me how to pronounce it in French. I should have asked one of the many people I know who speaks French before we recorded this podcast. I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna tweet it right now. How do I pronounce Bollinger in French?
I'm sure they'll answer you. I think you pronounce it Bofa.
Yeah, both of these Bollingers. I looked up how to pronounce. I didn't look up how to pronounce it. I looked up the Bollinger family to see if it was a real family. It is not from that time period. It is it's currently a family that owns a vineyard, but it dates to, like, the late 1800s. So there is no historical Bollingers.
But that name probably, like, is an old last name.
It's an actual French last name that has existed. There's just no, like, historical Bollingers who existed back in the, you know...
No, like, noble family.
Yeah. Who were important in some historical event.
That's probably good, considering all the fucked up shit they did. I mean...
Yeah.
Not good people, the Bollingers.
No.
The Bollinger.
I don't...
Bollinger?
Oh, what if it's something completely different? What if we're, like, completely missing the mark?
The fucking assholes. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Jack Offo.
Jack Offo. That guy's a fucking saint. Jeez.
Hey, we come from the Jacofos.
Yeah, so Giselle won't tell Michelle why she was banished from his house, and now Michelle's the one who's upset that someone won't up and up to him, and he orders her to tell him, and she's like, no, and she's afraid, and this is when he grabs her, and then when she like pushes him away, he also, like, starts yelling at someone who's not here, and he's like, who are you calling an abomination? And she's like, what?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Sir, this is a McDonald's.
And so she's suspicious of him. She thinks he's crazy. He thinks that she's not really a servant, and she has some ulterior motive. In the next scene, from Giselle's perspective, she's in the chapel thinking about God. This is very, like, big moment of, like, anachronism of, like, her being like, oh, if there is a God, why is he like this? Which I'm sure people have thought forever, but it's just like, you know, she's talking about it in a modern way.
Let me introduce you to this little book by my friend Job.
My note was, later in the chapel, Giselle contemplates God. In parentheses, who the fuck is this woman? Because she's, like, way beyond her time, which is cool. Like, she's a good character. But yeah, this is someone who exists sort of outside of historical expectations.
Yeah, she's, like, she comes across as, like, too, very modern and, like, too smart.
A time traveler?
Yeah, maybe.
My fan fiction, yes!
Man, what kind of fucked up stuff happened to you where you used your time machine and you went back to 1099? That's not... Ugh.
It probably broke. It's an accident.
Yeah. maybe. God, fucking what if, though?
Way against Jelly Person, 1099. Jelly Person, 1099. I don't know how this is going to go.
Oh, I don't know. I think I'd go with Jelly Person. Personally speaking.
Yes. Okay.
We'll talk about our theories at the end of the episode. But I'm putting a bookmark on time travel theory. So Giselle then flashes back to the real reason why she's here, which is that she is from a family of merchants. She lived with her mother and her older sister, and they were down on their luck, I guess. They didn't have enough money. They didn't have enough money for her sister to get married. And she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go work at the Bollinger family estate as a maid."
It wasn't like, though. It wasn't really like I can't afford a wedding kind of thing. It was like their family wasn't rich enough that she could marry into the family that she wanted to.
Her sister met like a minor nobleman, but so the merchant. So it's not like they couldn't get married, but they doesn't have enough money, so they didn't want them.
Yeah.
Right.
So she's trying to help with that so that her sister can get married, and so in exchange, so she goes there and she applies to be a maid, and basically in exchange for this.
So she doesn't apply. They come to her.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And they say in exchange for being a maid, we'll take care of your mother and sister. And that's as much as we get in that flashback. And then back to Michelle's perspective, so she's like talking to herself in the chapel out loud, and he's outside the chapel listening to her. Oh God, they deserve each other.
Classic sitcom misunderstanding.
Yeah, so he thinks that she's just after money. And he goes, he leaves the mansion. So right away, we're just we're just blowing through all these expectations, right? Yeah. Like he just freely leaves. He goes to a nearby house where there's a man who lives there, and that man was hired by his family to watch over him and make sure that he doesn't escape. Basically, who would inform them if he ever tried something or if something happened in the mansion. And he even is he talks to the servant like he could kill him with his curse, but then he's just kidding.
Lol.
So, and Michelle's like, I have to do what I never thought I would ever do. I have to write a letter to my mother.
Dun, dun, dun.
So he too is a very modern male.
Yes, exactly. I don't want to call my mom. And so he gives the man a letter to his mother.
The man is clearly scared of him, though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Piss in boots.
But the man's like, okay, sure. And he they never interact, and this guy clearly is not trying very hard to keep track of Michelle. He's just taking his cushy position, and he's fine with it. And as Michelle is leaving, the man starts to ask, "Is it true that you don't have ellipsis question mark?" And then Michelle scares him again and slams the door and leaves.
Yeah.
Chocolate.
So we talked about this a little before we started recording, but this is one of two lines that I think the localization is not doing what they should do. Because in Japanese, this line is, "I heard your body is," and then trails off. So we have a case here that localization is giving up more information that the original writers intended at this point. And there's another one that's even more extreme coming up very soon. So yeah, I personally, I don't like it. I think if the writers...
Why can't they just translate it literally all the time? Anyway.
Yeah, this is not about this. This is just about if the writers...
I was joking.
Yeah, I know you are. But seriously, if my opinion is if the writers... In this kind of situation where you give foreshadowing, then if the writers choose to give something or not give something away, then you should probably respect that when you're translating.
Yeah, that's more narrative focused than the actual words.
Yeah, they want to give information at a certain pace, and
yeah, maybe they thought that this sentence was more ambiguous than it is.
I think I almost feel like it might even be a case where you say oh, nobody would actually say something like, is it true that your body is, you know what I mean? Like, that is a little awkward, maybe.
Yeah,
but...
so leave the is away. Your body, and then it can go on in many more directions.
I was just saying, I could see the thought process is all, you know what I mean? But, like,
yeah,
I do agree also that
sure.
they should not have done it that way.
The Let's Player I'm watching this on YouTube in English actually guessed that he doesn't have a soul, which is another way to take this.
Yeah, that's the only other way I would take it. But I mean,
that's actually, that's how it's like,
that's very poetic.
that isn't how I took it, but that's kind of how I took it.
I've heard you've got a huge, excuse me, soul.
Smile. Anyway, so the implication, right, like, so at this point it's like, okay, there's some gender situation is afoot here, at the very least. And, so 10 days later, the response comes from Michelle's mom, and, he says there's foreboding narration about how he I love this because it sounds like it's like metaphorical, but it's literal. Like he literally is like because he talks about laying bare the scars on her chest and mercilessly plunging my knife into them, which again I was like, oh, like metaphorically, but no.
I mean, yeah, yes, no, but yes.
All right, wait. Can I tell you something that happened, by the way? Because this is the most ridiculous, I think, outcome of this. So I tweeted, can you tell me how to, pronounce Bollinger, in French? And Matt from from Best Friends DM'd me about it. Boulanger, but the J is very soft. Sorry, Boulanger. But, like, what are you, embarrassed by that? Why would he DM me that?
Well, now you're just putting him on blast, so...
I did, no, I DM'd him, like, can I call you out on this podcast? But then I didn't wait for an answer. So, cause, what? Just say it! Like, what's the problem here? Are you ashamed of me? We were on another podcast together, Matt.
No, he's afraid of being wrong. He doesn't want people to reply and be like, well, technically...
Well...
Yeah, also, I looked this up before. It's Boulanger, which I heard like 3 times I wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's also the episode title. Boulanger.
Spaghetti Boulanger.
Would you like some spaghetti Boulanger?
Exactly. So, meanwhile, Giselle, she's losing her optimism. She can't leave because she knows that her mother and sister will lose their protection if she leaves. She also, there's also a legend that there's a force in this house that twists people's hearts. So, this continues.
A fork in this house?
Yeah, a fork. A force. That's spaghetti Boulanger.
Give me a fork for my spaghetti Boulanger.
Use a fork and a spoon to twist your heart.
Yeah.
There we go.
Is it some meatball or a fork before me?
It's not what happens at the Lady and the Tramp level of Kingdom Hearts.
What? There's a Lady in the Tramp level of Kingdom Hearts? That's awesome.
No, I don't actually know. That's a joke, though. That's what they would do if there was one. I'm sure there is.
I was just kind of hoping, because I never played Kingdom Hearts or anything. Well, whatever. Anyway, I have mostly not played Kingdom Hearts.
Of the games I've played, there has not been a Lady in the Tramp level.
Oh,
that'd be awesome.
I still hope. So anyway, she decides to tell Michelle more about herself. She's like, I'm going to tell him. I'm going to tell him why I was kicked out. And so this is different than in the previous chapter where, like, the white-haired girl, I think was gonna... What was she gonna, like, confess to him or something? Or she was worried that she had upset him and she was going to apologize.
Yes.
And
she knocks on the door to apologize, yeah.
Yeah, and Giselle's going to say, like, okay, I'm going to be more honest with you. And she goes to his room, but he's not there. And she sees a painting draped in a black sheet.
She really shouldn't have gone in, though.
Yeah, because she knocks and then sneaks into the room, yeah.
Yeah, it's very, like, again, like, big, like, Beauty and the Beast vibes here, like, when she finds the rose.
Their whole relationship is super anime. It's just, like, super duper, like, oh, what should I do? I don't know. I'll just sneak into his room and figure it out.
Yeah. And so she uncovers the painting, and it is the painting of the white-haired girl that had the face scratched out that we saw in...
That Maria found in the cellar.
Yeah, that Maria found. And, of course, as soon as she finds that painting and uncovers it, Michelle is back. He threatens her with a knife.
With a gut? No, knife.
He just I like that he has a fucking knife on him all the time. Fucking Michelle. You know I keep that thing on me.
This is badass.
He's such a... I mean, like, if this was modern, he would absolutely be a weeaboo. Like, I mean, like, this is...
Sysadmin.
Yeah, and a sysadmin. He would absolutely, like, it's all there. So,
Like, he like lays out his knives to take Instagram pictures. Like, he's just like, hey, look at all my knives.
I was thinking he was one of those people who has like a way too big and sharp utility knife. Like, do you ever see that? Where like people are like, here, I'll get that for you.
I'm from Texas. That's like half the people here.
It's like a short... Right, it's like a short sword, but also the jaws of life somehow, and it's like, what situation were you hoping for?
Yeah, anyway. It's also like the one guy in your company who's just like, oh yeah, I handle all the physical stuff. Look at my giant knife when we need to cut this package. It's like, dude, you don't need a blade for that.
It's terrifying, right? Because like you're like, oh, you just have that all the time, huh? Okay, well, sure.
While you were reading Fata Morgana, I mastered the blade. But anyway.
It's always like, when you say that to them, though, it's like, oh, so you always have that on you? And they always creepily just answer, you won't believe how often I need to use this every day.
Oh my god, you're so right!
Yes,
oh my god, you're right.
That is every dude who answers that question has, like, rehearsed that in front of a mirror.
Ew, I hate this. Also, Michelle is that Japanese knife channel that makes knives out of things that knives shouldn't be made out of.
No, he's not.
He's not smart enough.
Great. That dude would be like, please read my books. Tell me everything. You know,
he's got 10 years of being alone, and you're telling me that he didn't form like an elaborate, spend 3 weeks to just make a dehydrator out of a cool hack.
No, I'm saying knife guy at Kiwami Japan, I think his name is on
Kiwami.
YouTube, is fucking awesome, and Michelle can only wish he's that cool.
Yeah, you're right. Kiwami Japan's probably a nicer person.
Kiwami Japan is pretty cool.
Yeah, Michelle can't even cook, anything other than by boiling.
No, that's right. That's rough.
So I don't think he has the wherewithal to come up with any sort of intricacies in his life.
That's true.
Yes.
I mean, granted, also, it is $10.99, so you probably had to make your knives out of shit like cow shit and hay. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. All right, I'm sure they had mines, but still, whatever. Anyway.
It's shortly after the Norman invasion of England, so maybe he's just English and doesn't know better than to just boil everything.
Oh, God.
Shout out to all our fans in England.
You're going to flaunt that this whole episode, huh? Is that how this is going to go? Fuck.
Yeah. You read Wikipedia next time, Mr. Smart Guy.
I know the first century, motherfucker. I didn't even look that shit up.
Oh, damn.
Battle of Hastings embedded in my brain.
So, back to the scene at hand. Michelle is threatening Giselle with a knife. He's asking her, why are you really here? But she can't answer him because she's having a PTSD flashback and she has a panic attack. And he doesn't understand what's going on and assumes that she can't tell him the truth because he has correctly guessed the truth. And, he reveals that in the letter that he got from his mom said that Giselle slept with his father, which is why she was banished to the mansion. She continues to have a panic attack, and he stabs her in the chest.
But metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
He stabs her, and she runs out of the mansion, and, she runs out into, it's raining and cold, and she, collapses on the ground, and...
Wait, before we get too dark, I'm gonna tell this joke. If you are gonna stab Giselle, though, I mean, 90% chance you hit her in the chest.
Yeah, there's not a lot of real estate. Y'all, let's talk... I don't know if this is the right time to talk about this. There's a lot of boobs.
There's a lot of boob this chapter. Let's just go with that.
This is not the right. No, we're about to walk into a different scene, which we need to move on. Content warning for anybody who could be affected by this. This The rest of this episode involves a shit ton of narrative, importantly, scenes that involve rape and sexual assault.
And torture.
Yeah, straight up torture.
This is rough. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get the flashback to what really happened, and basically the only reason that Michelle's father brought Giselle in as a maid is because he wanted to rape her, and he basically, because he has complete power over her, he blackmails her basically into sleeping with him, because otherwise, he's not going to help her family. And if she says anything, then obviously everything is her fault anyway.
Yeah, he says they're gonna believe, the master of the house versus some random maid. So
the whole time she's working there, once a week, she has to come to his room and be raped. And not just raped, but also tortured. And he would take a knife and hurt her with it. And he carved the word harlot into her skin with a knife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I dislike, obviously, like, rape as a character motivation, and this feels very gratuitous.
Yeah.
Like, her reaction is very realistic, but the degree that she was tortured feels very gratuitous.
I thought it was surprisingly well written for a Japanese visual novel. It didn't fall into the usual. I mean, it's not a masterpiece of writing, but it didn't fall into what Japanese like popular entertainment usually do with this subject.
Yeah, it's only gross and never sexy, which is good. Yeah.
And the good thing is they deal with skipping ahead. They deal with the repercussions of this in a very good way. They acknowledge that this is a significant trauma in someone's life, and that this will have repercussions for a long time. And they don't brush it off. That's I think it is the transition into this is it's quick and it's rough, and that part is not real easy. But I think afterwards they handle it well. If they didn't handle the transition in bringing it up all that well.
So of course, eventually, the situation is found out about when Michelle. So some of the maids tell Michelle's mother. She meets Michelle's mother for the first time. And Michelle's mother seems very sick in a bad way.
Mentally, yeah.
Mentally and physically.
Physically, too.
But she's just babbling,
Yeah. So something is wrong with Michelle's mother, not just physically, but mentally as well. And she finds out what's going on. She wants to kill Giselle, but Michelle's father says, no, we're gonna banish her.
I mean, she doesn't find out what's going on literally. She thinks they're having an affair. At that, or even that she seduced him, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's convinced that she seduced her husband.
Yeah.
And this scene is where the second foreshadowing translation problem occurs. So Michelle's mother thinks their estate is cursed. And she says something like, first it took my daughter away from me, and now it tries to take my husband.
Yeah. Who's this daughter we're hearing about?
Yeah. And once again, Japanese, it doesn't say daughter, it says child, without giving a gender to it. And this one is even more egregious than the first time. The translation just reveals more information.
Yeah, so this is really at this point in my notes, I was like, is Michelle trans? Is that what's happening here?
It definitely seems like that. It also works with the name thing. It could have been named Michelle and then changed them to Michelle, the feminine Michelle.
Exactly. So then, as Giselle continues to tell the story, she's on my way to the mansion. As she's being carted there, she resolves to cast aside her memories and find her smile once more. So basically, whatever this new situation was, it was gonna be better than the one she was in. So that's why she tried so hard to be positive. And we return back to the present, where she is having PTSD flashbacks in the rain outside. She prays to God for death, and it seems like she does die. But now we're back in the real present with the maid, us, the master of the mansion, and she's the maid, and we're here in the present, and she's telling us the story. And, let's see, Michelle and Giselle have a conversation where Michelle, is like, no, we have to continue to go through your past. You have to, before I can tell you, what I need to tell you, he has to know how she became the maid. So next, Giselle wakes up to someone reviving her. So a man from a local village, that the village that is always nearby the mansion.
The village in Fata Morgana.
Yeah, they found her. So this guy named, oh my god, Amadei.
There's like 1,000 apostrophes.
Yeah, there's a lot of accent to goose on that.
He finds her and he helps her, you know, she's there and he's very sweet and non-threatening, and like immediately I was suspicious of this whole situation because it was too nice.
Yeah, it's written to be like, no way. You can't trust this guy.
But he helps her nurse back to health, and the whole village is there, and he's like, you can stay here. Our village is a communist utopia, and you get a free house.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we're in a narco-syndicalist commune.
Yeah, exactly. So Amadei is like kind of like the mayor, although they don't really have mayors. He's the youth group leader.
Yeah, and they've been lucky that no lord has found their city.
Yeah, the feudal lords don't know about this village because they were traveling and they just founded the village over there, so they don't have to pay taxes. But they built it on like the ruins of an ancient city, and they give enough details that makes me think that this is probably referring to something in the real world. But I tried researching it and I couldn't find anything. They just talk a lot about how this was an international city with a lot of people from all over the world, and how it was ruined in a single week.
Atlantis. Oh, sorry.
Was there ever was it? Could it have also been Paris? Was that like, was it moved? I don't remember.
It wasn't Paris, but it was probably somewhere in France. And I tried looking like ancient France in Wikipedia, but I couldn't find anything that seemed relevant.
Well,
Jim, this is your time to shine now. Come on, where's that Battle of Hastings? Oh, all right.
I'll like call me out on that one.
Yeah.
It seems very rude.
Well, everybody can Wikipedia that in the background as we talk about the...
Let me tweet it. See which of the super best friend Saibatsu gets back to me. Sorry, anyway.
So
it's like a race. Hey, y'all, we're going to put this up on the big board. Y'all can see which one gets back.
This is how I'm going to bring them back together. Anyway.
You're that quiz show. Alright, so... even though she is in this much better situation, Giselle can't help thinking about Michelle and all the mysteries surrounding him. Why did he, quote, make a pact with the devil, which he says about himself and other people say about him? And she's also like, why would people think he's dead? So I guess like I think he says like that his father thinks that he's dead. So not everyone in his family knows that he's alive and that he's out here in this mansion. Then we switch to Michelle's perspective, and he feels incredibly guilty.
They didn't say, meanwhile, back at the mansion.
I didn't. Oh, meanwhile, back at the mansion.
Our brand. Sorry.
So Michelle feels guilty because he knows. I didn't write that this time. I just wrote whose perspective it was in my notes. So he feels guilty because he knows that she wasn't actually lying to him deep down, probably, and he feels incredibly guilty, as he should. He feels so guilty that he covers the stained glass window of Michael. Then back to Giselle's perspective. So she's popular with the children in the town. They want to play with her. The people in the city, you know, are nice to her. She learns more about the history of it, and in addition to the fact that it was destroyed in a single week, they found stone tablets that say we've been cursed by a witch. Amade says that he says that the witch's name is Morgana, and Giselle...
And she was heavy. Oh, sorry.
And Giselle thinks that, she thinks like, oh, well, that house and Michelle, like, they're nothing to me now, but she doesn't tell Amade about or anyone about the mansion, that she knows where it is, or that, like, she knows about, like, the witch and the whole, like, thing that's going on there.
That whole thing.
And, after a while, she is adjusting nicely, and, Amade, approaches her about marriage. It's been like a month, but like, you know, it's 1099.
I mean, that's a long time though in 1099, to be fair.
We're gonna die in a couple weeks, so like, yeah.
Yeah. You had like the life of like lifespan of a housefly, so it's just like, you know what, listen. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, you're only gonna live till you're 40. So, Giselle feels uncomfortable about the proposal, even though it seems like sort of the natural thing to do in her situation. And she finds herself thinking about Michelle because she loves him and not this nice guy, this nice mayor.
Yep. And the nice mayor with the dark cloud above him apparently is not as good as the bad boy.
Yeah. So he keeps asking her, and she's like, I don't know. And of course she's not going to say like, I'm not comfortable with romantic relationships right now because I was raped. Like, you know, she's not going to say that to him. So she's in a bad spot. And then one day, the villagers find out that a lord has found out about this village. And they're really mad about it because now they have to pay taxes. And the lord is trying to charge them 5 years of back taxes, which is, wow.
Yeah. Good luck with the communism, guys.
Yeah, so they don't have 5 years of back taxes, obviously. And Amade, like, he talks about it and he's, like, very, like, resigned. Which, in retrospect, like, makes me think that it was actually him that did this.
Oh, totally, because he was rejected, and now he's just like, fuck this shit, I'm gonna get that bitch.
Yeah, but that he's the one who sold them out to a lord.
Oh,
also.
Yeah.
Because he's very like, well, I guess we just have to do this now. Which, like, what? So everyone starts turning against each other.
He talked about how he had an army that would, or something like that. Like, the Lord clearly outnumbered them in many ways. So
well, yeah, I mean, in other scenarios, they couldn't kill a guy with a sword. I mean, this is not a great, village for fighting.
Totally. And Amade's been portraying himself as this guy who's like, I am above you because I had some sort of clergy training, so I will shepherd you all into this new thing. And then as soon as something changes that doesn't advantage him, he's just like, yeah, you guys should watch out for the Lord, who I just told about you.
Yeah. So everyone starts turning against each other and arguing all the time, and eventually the villagers accuse Giselle of stealing. Even Amade accuses her. They all collectively are like, it's you, you're the new person here, you must have sold us out, like, this is all your fault. And they try to interrogate her about the items that they're accusing her of stealing by torturing her, by water torturing her. They fucking waterboard Giselle.
Well, with sewage too.
Yeah.
They dunk her head in, like, it's, yeah, and it's like, yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's really intense.
That is essentially waterboarding, just like, they just shove her head into a bucket of swill.
So waterboarding is supposed to give you the sensation of drowning, but this is literally pretty much drowning her with, like,
with breaks in between.
How do they even know to do this?
Oh, I mean, it's 1100. They haven't invented waterboarding where it's like, here's how you do it without actually drowning someone and just making them feel like they're going to. This is like, I think you just drown them and then stop after a minute.
Yeah, like you're a good torturer if you pull up at the right time. Like, oh, no, still breathing.
I guess the Crusades was the time when, like, it was important to be very skilled as a torturer.
Like, yeah, like those, like, horror, I guess, like, people who, like, come up with really horrible things were, like, considered, like, really creative back then, maybe?
Also, they had a good screening process, which was just like, oh, lost another one, oh well, try another torturer.
Yeah. So, then it gets really rough. And this also seems like very gratuitous, where they're like, basically, if you can't produce something of equal value to what you stole, then she's gonna become the village property, which is like, basically all the men in the village are gonna rape her whenever they feel like it. Which feels extremely gratuitous.
And this also seems very orchestrated by Amade. This feels like, I'm going to screw you over for not consenting to be with me.
Yeah, and so backed into a corner, she remembers the infamous furniture line about the mansion, and so she tells them, like, go to the mansion and get all the furniture. Like, it's full of expensive stuff. You can pay your back taxes. And so they all go, and they have her lead the way, in case she's lying. And they immediately go to break down the door. They don't even knock on it and try to talk to Michelle. They're already an angry mob. And so they break down the door, and Michelle appears in the doorway with his white hair and red eyes and puts on this big show and yells, and he's like, I'm a demon. And they're all terrified of him, even though he has no display of having any powers, which is great. So he does a good magic show.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I'm going to put all these plagues on you.
Yeah.
Can I mention I really love the art in this game, but this does not work.
Michelle's not very intimidating. Yeah.
Not even a little.
All his hair turns up, though, so you know he's angry.
He's
towering
Super
up.
Saiyan 3.
Yeah, this scene is also the first gratuitous image of Giselle.
Is that now?
Yeah, that's true. That is the first one, yeah.
Yeah. It leads into a couple of those.
Yeah, so he asks for Giselle as an offering from them because he sees that she's clearly in a bad situation. And so he kind of like saves her in a way. And Giselle's now back at the mansion, kind of. And Giselle's just like shell-shocked from everything that has happened, and she is like, is there kindness in this world? She doesn't know. And after everyone's gone and it's just the two of them, Michelle yells at her again and tells her to go away and all this stuff, and Giselle is so done, and so she just like yells back at him and is like, fine, then kill me. If you want me to leave, then kill me. Like, I have nothing to live for, so kill me. And she's like begging him to kill her. And in typical Michelle fashion, he didn't expect that response or whatever. So then he's like, no, wait, hold on.
Whoa.
Let's talk about this.
I love how dumbfounded he gets about this.
Yeah, he's such a shit. He's such a selfish brat. And, so he's like, okay, I'll listen. Like, let's talk. I'll listen and I'll believe, or not that he'll believe, but he wants to listen to what she has to say, and that
I waited till you were actually willing to actually kill yourself right in front of me before I am willing to listen.
Yeah, right? Jeez, wow. I thought that, I thought getting back together with my ex was hard, but this is a whole nother level.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. So Michelle is basically so overwhelmed by her response that his mind is opened to actually believing her, and she sits down and tells him the whole story of what happened, and,
I actually like the dialogue right before this, where, he asks her to explain, and she says, will you believe me if I do? And he says, well, I to be honest, I am not sure until I hear it. And she says, well, that's probably actually more fair than saying you'll unconditionally accept what I say.
Yeah. And, so she explains and tells Michelle that his father raped her, and he believes her, and he's so disgusted that he's disgusted by the own blood in his body. And, she says, like, do you want to, will you believe, do you need to see my wounds in order to believe me? And he says no. And, Michelle finally, he says, like, he finally begins to, like, face himself and his beliefs and actions. and saying like that I was so selfish and like I was so blind, I was so focused on my own pain, I didn't even realize that she had gone through all this pain and all I did was make it worse, and that was awful of me. And he finally tells her more about himself, and Michelle reveals that he has 2 brothers who know that he's there. One of them probably wrote that letter that Giselle got explaining the situation. Michelle's father believes he's dead. Michelle writes letters to his brother, but his brother won't respond to any of his letters.
And it tells her that he was banished because of his white hair and red eyes, and everyone thought he was a demon. And there's obviously more to that story. I mean...
Yeah, and Giselle also is empowered to yell at Michelle for being a jerk. And she yells at him, and she commands him to apologize several times, and he does. He, like, gets on the ground and is like, I'm sorry! Over and over again.
And she laughs at him for doing that.
Yeah, and eventually she laughs at him. And she's like, I'm sorry, because all those people could have killed you. And he's like, I deserved that, though. After what I did to you and the person I am. And then they just, like, have a moment, I think, where they like, laugh and they find themselves calm in a way that, like, is surprising to them, which is, of course, them realizing, we're not quite acknowledging yet, but realizing that they love each other.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is that they aren't, like the reaction is pretty swift in terms of how quickly they turn, but it's also, like, it's a big relief. This whole scene is a big relief from everything that's gone on before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go on to like try to live their life together. And when it switches to Giselle's perspective, and she says, "Michelle was like me, just an ordinary person," which is, from her perspective, like he was this like mysterious guy and like this monstrous person, and it's like, no, he's just a guy. So now she asks him more about his backstory. He is hearing the voice of Morgana. He talks back to her sometimes, but Giselle doesn't believe that voice is real. She just thinks that that's from living alone for 10 years with no one to talk to.
Yep.
He says it is a condition in which he has to vocalize responses to thoughts in his head.
And she doesn't believe him, and immediately doesn't believe him, and then he's like, I wanted to know what you're thinking about me, and then she's like, no, I totally believe you.
Yeah. She's not quite good at that yet.
Yeah, neither one of them are good at communicating.
Yeah, he doesn't have any magical powers, and he says the reason people don't think he's human is because of his body. And Giselle is like, oh, because of your hair, skin, and eyes, right? And he says, long ellipsis, yes.
Yeah, I'm totally wrong about this. At first, when I heard the first reading, because Michelle presents as very aggressive, and I'm just like, oh, sure, that's probably this one thing, and it's like, nah, they are definitely telegraphing that at least, if not trans, there's some intersexuality going on.
Yeah, and there's another point where she realizes that she's physically attracted to him. I think, maybe it's later, but she says that he's pretty. She doesn't say that he's beautiful or handsome. She says pretty, which I think was like another way of like lampshading that.
Then she says, pretty stupid looking.
Yeah, exactly.
But they've always drawn him as pretty, or whatever Michelle is. They've always drawn Michelle as pretty, like 100%.
I think it happens once they open the windows and she sees him in full light, which he didn't do.
Yeah.
So he explains that his birth messed up his mother. They thought that he was possessed by a demon when they saw he was sensitive to sunlight. And his mother banished him here until his curse was broken.
Let's be fair, we thought he was a vampire.
Yeah.
We thought Michelle was a vampire.
Totally.
So Giselle's like, I don't think you look like a demon. I think you look more like an angel. Aww.
Barf.
Barf. So, Michelle says that if he tried to run, then I've already forgotten how to say Bollinger in the right way.
Bollinger.
Bolognese.
Bazinga.
The Bazingas would have had him killed.
Bozinga.
The spaghetti Bollinger would have had him killed. And, let's see. Giselle is like, if you hear the witch's voice, I'll help you. Like, I'll shout so loud so that you can't hear her. Like, tell me when you hear her and I'll hold your hand. And, that's cute. And then Michelle says, please be straightforward about everything that you want because I can't pick up on subtext.
He's not wrong,
about being a woman.
God, I feel like
Michelle is a very big mood for me.
that's like big, like, being a woman who dates men mood as well.
Yeah, that is exactly what that is.
At least he's self-aware.
Get used to that one.
It's so funny. Oh my god. Like, I've been asked that in real life, so I just, like, that made me smile. And so yeah, and then she's asked if they can open the windows, and he explains that the windows were barred when he arrived, so, like, he didn't do that. And, they open the windows together. It's a big accomplishment in their relationship of not hating each other or being terrible. But then interestingly, the next scene is, like, Giselle is by herself worrying in the dark, and, so it's like, oh, well, things are going good, but she, like, still, doesn't quite believe it in her heart. And, then she gets a knock on her door, and she goes to answer, and it, like, kind of is almost like, is something scary gonna happen? But, Michelle left a warm glass of wine at her door and left. What a fucking dork.
I've never heard of wine served warm.
Like,
I guess
like
mulled wine.
Mulled wine?
Mulled wine, right?
It's mulled wine. Yeah.
I assume it's cold there, too. So, I don't know. Anyway, he does that, and then we get we step back out of the story, and we're back in the present time with the maid. And, she's kind of like, can we just, like, stay here in this happy time? And he's like, there's happy days ahead, but there's no way the story ends with a happy ending.
But also, she kind of acknowledges now, I don't know if she did before, that she knows that these are the roles. That you are Michelle and I am Giselle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as she's speaking, like, oh yeah, this is, she doesn't explicitly say it, but, like, she is going along with the story more than she was before. So back to Michelle's perspective, we come back to the flashback scene that we saw in the master bedroom of Giselle opening the window and waking up Michelle, who is grumpy and doesn't want to wake up. And they're still really stubborn with each other all the time. They, like, pester each other, and, like, he's like, no, I don't want to get up, and she's like, come on, you have to wake up, the morning is the best part of the day, and, like...
Yeah, fuck that shit.
Yeah. They're both over the top at each other, but, like, in an endearing way, but, like, also kind of in a grating way. Like, calm down,
It's very anime. It's very like, oh yeah, okay, we're gonna do this scene. Here comes the scene where you're super positive and I'm super negative, and I got a frowny face.
Yeah, and then this is the part, where she says, like, oh, I never realized how pretty he was. And then Michelle is gonna help her with the cleaning. And he's like, I'm not gonna act like you're superior anymore. And because he says I'm not gonna act like it, instead of phrasing it differently, it sort of, like, carries the predicate that the whole thing was fake to begin with. Like, he's acknowledging, like, that he personally believes the whole thing is fake anyway, and they both sort of have that in common, of that very, like, humanistic view on, like, the world and on other people. Where they are, like, very, like, easily acknowledge that, like, the idea of status is a social construct and not real in that way of, like, between the two of them living outside society, they don't have to follow those rules. Then we get a really anime aside where she's like, have you ever cut your hair? And he's like, no, but you can cut it if you want. And she's like, okay, but my sister always said I was really dangerous with scissors. You might lose an ear. And he's like, no, never mind.
Stay the fuck away from my hair. That beautiful hair.
And so as they continue their...
It's what's implied.
Yeah. He's worked so hard growing it. So, as they continue living together, Michelle is, like, in shock at feeling normal human emotions. He's like, I didn't need to, like, pick apart everything she says anymore. Wow, great growth, honey.
How about being a straight cis male, guys? What do you think?
Let's be fair. He's how long has he been alone? Like 8 years now?
10
10
years.
10 years, and he was abandoned as a child.
11 by now because the year has passed.
Yeah, I mean it's actually.
I mean, like we're all applying our own values onto this, which is funny, but like it's, in terms of the narrative story, like yeah, this is an abandoned child who didn't have any way of adapting.
Yeah. So he also won't eat his vegetables. This is where Giselle asks if she can make requests, and he's like, yeah. And Michelle tells more about his backstory, that his father wanted him dead, but his brothers helped him fake his death, so that's why his father thinks he's dead and doesn't know he's here. Giselle teaches Michelle to cook, and she's kind of like overly over the top at him in terms of cooking. She's like, oh, how are you going to know if I made you something really good if you don't know how to even cook anything? You don't know what good food tastes like. And, then some real anime happens. Then they're cleaning the dust off of the bookshelves, and Giselle's like, hold this chair while I clean this, and he's like, okay, and then she falls off the chair, and he catches her, and he touches her boob by accident.
Yeah.
As you do.
I mean, the first thing you grab for, you know.
In his defense, though, yeah.
In his flustered explanation of what happens, though, he says, oh, it felt like a fat mouse.
Yeah.
Rat.
Yeah,
What's that,
I
rat?
hardly even perceived it as a breast. God.
It's better than bags of sand, but not by much.
And she's like upset that he compares her boob to a fat rat. And she then switches to Giselle's perspective, and she asks Michelle what he's been doing all this time by himself. And
You did the best thing you could.
What
she
have
even
you been-
asks him just like that, because like literally the next thing I wrote in my own notes to myself is just jerking off mostly.
Grabbing his own fat rat.
Well, or using rats in ways they weren't intended for.
Yeah. Oh god. So that she, but then he says,
God, you got some obese rats up there, baby.
he says I play chess by myself, which is the same thing.
That's the best euphemism they had in that.
$10.99, yeah. And
Right.
Taily Whiskers never did this voluntarily.
Oh my god. So they play chess together, and he easily beats her. Like, and she gets mad, and she's like, well, this game is stupid. Let's play a different game.
Let's play a real game.
Arm wrestling. And they arm wrestle, and she easily beats him.
Yeah. He's like, that sounds crass. But let's do it, I guess.
Also, these are two of the skinniest armed people wrestling each other I've ever seen in my fucking life.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought it was like the first choice.
Yeah, as we were going into it, I'm like, I don't know who to bank on.
I'm not betting on anybody. I'm like, either one of you could break that like a twig.
Yeah. So then Michelle has a good line. He's thinking to himself, and he's like, oh, I began more freely engaging in silliness as I lived with Giselle, which is so funny. And showing emotions. Many months pass, and we have a scene of them reading by the fire, which is a scene that we did get a flashback of Giselle's line here, because she talks about how something about like troubadours performing at pubs, and we had gotten a flashback in the mansion of that line before. And she points out that they are reading together, just like she suggested back when she was first in the mansion, when they were in the library, and she was like, oh, we could read together if you think these books are boring. Maybe that'll be fun. And now we're actually doing it. And he's like, wow. And he suddenly says to her, if I ever have to return home, like, because basically the idea was that he was going to return home after his father died. And he says, when that happens, I'll make sure you have a comfortable life. And then he's like, but I would prefer it if you would join me. As a servant, I mean. Yes,
Yeah.
as a servant.
We're short on people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd probably fit you in.
And he is, like, very caught up in this moment of, like, being physically close to her. And he ominously thinks to himself, I thought I had already learned my lesson about having feelings for someone else. But I don't think we're going to learn about any of that until we learn about Michelle's backstory, which is, like, I feel like that's going to be the final thing of, like, learning about Michelle's life before he was in the mansion. So they reach 1 full year of living together, and it's commemorated by Giselle wakes up one morning and finds that a single red rose has bloomed in the garden because she requested flower seeds last year in the loot box, and she grew the rose as a gift to Michelle. And it's a red rose, like the flashback of where the white-haired girl picks the white rose, and it turns red. And Michelle is so excited about he's so enthusiastic about the rose that he picks it by accident. And trying to look cool like he did it on purpose, he puts the rose in Giselle's hair, and then he's like, why did I do that? Oh my god. And she's like, oh, you like, oh, and he's like, oh, I wanted to draw the rose, and I thought that you would be a good backdrop, so I'm gonna draw. I'm gonna draw now. I'm gonna go get some stuff, and, like, you pose, and I'll draw you. He can't draw.
Yeah, you know how we established I really like to draw?
So he can't draw, so they're sitting there in the chapel, and he's, like, pretending to know how to draw. And then he's like, oh, this is awkward, but now he's really happy that he gets to look at her so much.
Yeah.
And
like every guy who's ever been like, hey, I want to draw you, he's incredibly awkward in the way he presents that.
It's so meet cute. And eventually he stops trying to draw and just looks at her. And then we switch to Giselle's perspective, and she's, like, confused. She's like, what's going on? Like, and she's like, it would make it sound like Michelle's attracted to me. That's impossible. That couldn't possibly be true. But then, you can't fight the moonlight. So she says, she looks into the moonlight coming through the window or whatever, and says without thinking, because he's like, oh, I'm not even good at this. This is not worth it. Well, let's not do this. And she's like, I'd be happy with anything drawn for me by the man I love. And then he immediately drops the canvas.
Just throws the whole shit on the floor and, like, rattles everybody.
Yeah. And then she's like, oh no, and she comes over, and then they're close, and they have, like, a romance moment, and they get really close, like they're gonna kiss, but at the last second, Giselle has a PTSD flashback and pushes him away. And Michelle feels really awful about it. He's not even sure what happened. He leaves, and she's like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that. And she's like, no, I'm not, it's not gonna be the same, like, this is not, like, she's, like, resolves to go after him and to not, like, let her past ruin this moment that they had.
Yeah.
And, Michelle is in his room, like, freaking out. He's like, this was a mistake, everything is a mistake, she doesn't even like me, like, I like her, like, I can't do this is a bad idea. And she bursts in and asks for another opportunity to confess to him properly.
Yeah, and it's a very, like, non-anime moment. It's a very, like, this is not the kind of narrative you see of two people, like, crisscrossing, like, star-crossed lovers. She just goes in and be like, listen, I fucked up that last scene. We shouldn't have done this. Like, I just want to tell you how I feel, and then you could give it back or not. Whatever happens, happens. But I need to tell you straight up. Which is, like, you never see this in literature.
Yeah, and so she says, I love you so much, my heart's gonna burst, and please tell me how you feel about me. And Michelle's, like, standing. He's like, I'm standing right there. Like, my happiness, everything I wanted was, like, right there. And all I needed to do was claim it and say, yes, I feel the same way. But then the voice of Morgana in his head tells him that he's bad. And he says, no, I don't feel that way about you. And, Morgana's like, it's better that, and then, like, she's upset. And then Morgana says, like, oh, you should have just gone along with it, because when she learned the truth, she would have pushed you away anyway. And the voice is like, she could never love the real you. And Michelle has a flashback to being in a room with someone, and that person is rejecting him and calling him disgusting. So again, with the body issues imagery. But then he's like, no, I'm gonna overcome you, voice. And he says, wait, Giselle. And the voice is like, it won't be any different. And he's like, she's different. And then he's like, no, I do love you. And they embrace. And then she's like, and then she makes him say, I love you over and over again. And then...
It's a very sweet scene.
Yeah, that was really cute. And then she really pulls a fast one, because she's like, I want you to look at my body. And he's like, what? She's like, I want to show you all the scars that I have. And Michelle is like, there's a girl here, and she's going to take off her clothes.
Yeah, and it really feels like the way you lead into this scene is like, this is going to be another one of those like awkward scenes where like, you know, the girl exposes herself and is vulnerable, and the guy is awkward, and like this is going to end weird, and it's going to take a while for them to adapt, and then they'll just screw. No, it really, like, it telegraphs
No, I know, it was
that,
just funny there.
and then the writing gets really good.
Yeah, it's a very intimate scene and very sweet, and she's like so terrified that he's going to reject her because she has these horrible scars on her body from when she was tortured, and he goes up and touches the scars, and he's like, of course she hasn't healed from her past experiences. Like, what a fool I was to even think it was possible, like, after such little time. And he says to her, just theoretically, if I could cast a curse on my father, would you want me to? I mean, hypothetically speaking, not that I can maybe actually, you know, curse someone, but if I could, would you want me to? But she says no, because that would mean that those events still have control over her, and she wants to eventually forget them.
This is such good writing.
It's so good, and he's like, how can I help her? He's just like so upset because he wants to help her, and he just holds her.
It keeps repeating how she starts to shiver every time he touches her.
Yeah, but he does the right thing where he's just like, listen, I'm not going to push anything. You're going to process this the way you need to. I'm going to be here to support you because I don't have a say in this. Yeah. Like, he's not like, I'm going to go back and fuck that guy up because he messed with you. He's not like, I'm going to kill my dad because what he did to you. He's like, nope, it's about you, not about me.
Yeah, it's good, surprising writing because it doesn't do that thing where like love is a magic cure that heals her PTSD. Yeah, the PTSD is still there and it's still going to be there, even though.
Yep.
The emotional relationship that they have is so real. It feels very like real and sort of like, I mean, it feels, I guess, it's not modern in a sense, but it's like, it's universal, right? It's like two people leveling with each other as human beings and respecting each other as human beings. And it just, it's really, really good. You really feel it. And Michelle internally resolves that he's gonna care for her and he's gonna really try. Like, he realizes that he needs to take care of her more than he has been.
Now, what do you think about the art they put, like, over this scene? Because the art is...
The art is some big honkin' bazongas.
Exactly, and I can't decide if it's... because it is... There's something about it that isn't exactly, like, sexy. But on the other hand, it's huge boobs.
It feels very like, this is just my art style.
Yeah, there's definitely like a trope part of this, but there's also like the facial expressions are not, hey, this is sexy stuff. Yeah. Just, if you want to whack off, to pause the game and whack off. Like,
I mean, you still can.
It isn't one of those things. I mean, you could. Yeah, I mean, it's up to you.
But you could also do that at any point in the game.
But, I mean, it doesn't feel like the game is not encouraging this behavior.
That's the fact that the outfits Giselle wears throughout most of this chapter is not something I would imagine someone with PTSD would wear.
Yeah, her titties is just out all the time.
There's also, in this art, at least I didn't notice any actual scars, despite that being, sort of the point of the...
It's supposed to be all in her, like, lower body. And we're only showing the upper body. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is important that they keep mentioning it without showing it. And they do show the breasts a lot.
For a long time.
A long time.
I remember reading something about, like, 19th or 18th century fashion or something like that, where, like, not all times in, like, Western culture were breasts considered sexual. So, I mean, obviously they are now, so, like, having Giselle have her tits out all the time, like, means something currently, like,
I do this. That's those times in humanity when breasts weren't considered sex. That was why they called it the Dark Ages. But anyway. Sorry.
It was, like, much more like, these are for babies. I don't know, man.
No. It was just sort of a funny thing to imagine, like some guy in a church or something, like, these are for babies with, like, you know, but
do not covet the breasts because those are for babies.
Which is weird because at some point some guy was like, actually, these are good.
That was like, yeah, that's like a total fetish back then, right? Like, okay, I'm sorry, we're derailing here.
People were probably always the same.
Yeah, they were exactly the same. They've always been the same.
There were totally feet people back in the Dark Ages.
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah.
Because, like, 90% of, like, kink is just like, you say I shouldn't do this shit? Well, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do this shit all over the place. Like, that's what we do. We are human beings who need to react to stuff that you tell me not to do.
So, meanwhile, back at the mansion, Giselle, so they hold each other for a long time, and Giselle is like, I can't, like, she's like, I can't, like, touch you in that way, or, like, I can't be intimate with you, but I would like to be. Like, I want to be eventually able to do that. And, then the next scene is the next morning, and when she wakes up, I like this a lot because I think this is a really good characterization of Giselle, where she tries to cover up the uncomfortable discussion they had the previous night by making a dirty joke as if they had had sex, which would obviously be, like, extremely traumatizing to her. And he's like, don't do that. Like, you know, like, don't make jokes like that. Like, you don't have to do that. And she's like, oh, I won't, okay.
Yeah, he shuts it down right away. He's just like, no, that's inappropriate. Like, I was here for you, and, like, this just wasn't a thing that you need to cover up.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think it has some significance to him and his own body issues as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then he tries to call her babe.
Yeah, that
was the best part of that's the best part of the chapter. Absolutely.
Really, that's the line I was talking about earlier that I think they went too far.
Oh yeah, what is it in Japanese? Because it's obviously he's trying to call her a pet name, right? Like
in Japanese, he usually calls her. So you know how in Japanese they have, like, several second-person pronouns to use depending on the situation. Mm-hmm. So throughout most of the chapter, he uses, like, anata, which is the one most Westerners know, which is, like, kind of distant and maybe a little condescending. So she tells him not to call her that, and he tries. Eventually, she wants him to call him by your name, just say Giselle. But the one that they translated as babe is like he goes to Kimi, which is another second person pronoun that's more for like loved ones.
Aw, that's much sweeter than their choice of babe.
I does emphasize his like the way he is distant from the current conversation.
I would translate it to something like dear, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Tits McGee. That's how I would translate it. Sorry.
Good morning, sugar tits.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That is much closer to the original.
Babe takes it like so much into modern speech that.
Yeah, it's very modern and gross.
Babe's
and
weird too. Like, I feel like it's one of the. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Tell me your opinions on calling your loved one babe.
It's just a weird thing to read. It comes across very aloof, I think, or like, I don't know.
You think of like a surfer guy, like being like, "Hey, babe," or like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But also, like, it's your the way you converse with someone, especially someone intimate, is framed by the way you have always conversed with them, like the way you've done it from the beginning. And if you jump from like never saying that to saying it, it's gonna sound weird as fuck.
Yeah, but they've been using like she called him master, and you can't really do that, I think, with a lover, probably.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Well, you can, but
Not
not
like
not
this.
in.
But also, that transition makes more sense than going from, like, hey, you, to hey, babe.
Yeah. So then there's a break again where we're back in the present moment, and the maid is saying to us, or to Michelle, why not stop here and continue from that moment, that happy moment, instead of finishing the story? And he's like, we have to finish the story. And she asks him to hold her hand again, and he thinks like, oh, she's been asking me to hold her hand this whole time, but maybe it wasn't for me, maybe it was for her.
Yeah.
So a month has passed since they confessed they loved each other, and Michelle's father has died. And Michelle is like, oh, so I might, like, they might tell me to come home now, but they still don't know. Like, they don't know what's gonna happen, because, like, nobody's telling them, like, one way or the other. And so they're talking about it at night while they're laying in bed. And, Michelle's worried, and Giselle's like, well, if it doesn't happen, I would be happy staying here with you. Like, I don't have to go back. And he's like, yeah. And they're both, like, just nervous about change after all this time. And then at that moment, Giselle's like, she basically says, like, that they could have sex right now if he wanted to, that she felt, like, comfortable enough, finally. But Michel kind of deflects it for his own sake. He's kind of like, oh, no, I mean, we don't need to rush into this or anything.
Yeah, but she also still clearly has PTSD because he tries to touch her a little bit and she's still shivering.
And so but she wants to work on it. But I think he is also uncomfortable just with his own body issues. And so the next day, Michel writes a letter to his family. And
says he writes 2 letters, one to his brother and one to his mother, which is probably important.
And then we switch to Giselle's perspective, and she's like telling herself, like, whatever happens, it's gonna be okay. And then a group of people approaches the mansion, and it's not an escort, and it's not even an angry mob, it's a bunch of knights. Goddamn crusade is here, y'all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is definitely the...
Well, Jim spoiled that for us.
Yeah, people are shooting arrows through the windows.
There's a knight with his cross on his chest.
But before she realizes that, she thinks it might be the villagers.
Yeah, coming, to kill them after they drove them away. So there's like a bunch of soldiers that are attacking the mansion, and just like in the previous chapter, they run up to the observation tower and hide in there and hope that they don't find him. And Michel says that this is all his fault because he challenged the witch, and because of that, she made his curse real, which is a loaded statement. And so they hide in the observation room, and Michel starts talking to the witch again. And Giselle like doesn't know what he's talking to her about, but he just kind of like zones out for a minute and then comes back, and he's like, and he runs out of the room to give his life to protect her, and she's like, Michelle, the witch isn't real, and he's like, the witch told me that she would ensure your safety, and so she's on the other side of the door, like banging on the door, she's like, the witch isn't real, like it's just something you made up to deal with being alone, and he's like, no, she's real, and she's like banging on the door.
She's real and my best friend.
Yeah, the witch is real and my friend. And she's like banging on the door and screaming, but it seems like only Michel can hear her and nobody else. And
it seems like the witch is definitely real.
Yeah, the witch is definitely real. The knights come up the stairs. They all stab Michel at the same time. We get a CG of Michel being stabbed multiple times. And Giselle also cannot open the door. Like, she's locked in in a magical sense, because after Michel dies and the knights are gone, and they drag his body away.
Yeah, she screams the whole time, they can't hear her.
Yeah. And she screams that Michel is not cursed, he's not a witch, like he let him go, like it's not fair. And
she even says that she's the witch, that they should take her instead.
And they kill him and they drag him off to crucify him, which is what we heard at the very beginning of the game, where someone was dead and being dragged to be crucified, and we're like, who crucifies people after they die?
Yep.
Oh, by the way, that actually is very, very common when they crucified people. It would typically be after they died.
Mm-hmm.
The more you know. So after a long time passes, the door suddenly and unceremoniously opens, and Giselle sees Michel's blood all over the floor, and those are all the memories that Michel has, because that's when he died. And now we're back in the present with the maid, and he says, well, next I need to hear from you. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna tell what happened next. And we get a title card, The Maid's Tale, The Sixth Door, 1099 through, ?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And she emphasizes the fact that, like, you left me. Like, this was not okay that you decided for me. You left me behind, and this is what happens after you left.
Yeah, so it sounds like he made a deal with the witch, and then she makes a deal with the witch, and that's the whole problem. If they had died right there...
Yep.
None of this would have... I mean, they would have been dead, but obviously reincarnation is real, so maybe they would have found a happier life on their own without the witch's magic.
Yep, but we will discover that next time.
Mm-hmm.
Next time.
On the House of...
Regarding next time, because I'm looking at the walkthrough right now, and I'm not sure how far we're supposed to read based on this walkthrough.
Exactly half of Chapter 6, which is up to your own discretion.
Yeah. But one thing, try to save often, because at one point there's going to be a choice. Not really a choice, it's a limited time choice.
My god.
You have 3 seconds to click something, and if you don't, you get another bad.
30 hours in, and they give you 30 seconds, and they're like, time's choice.
30 seconds, is it to click a boob? Because again, I think, odds are...
No, it's not 30, it's not 30, it's 3 seconds.
3
Wow,
and
okay.
if you don't click it, you get a bad ending, and if you do click it, you...
On a game with so minimal interaction so far, why would they do that?
Okay, so what we're going to do here is, like, for all those of you listening, when we figure out what this is, when the first one of us sacrifices their save, we will post this in the Twitter page, and
we'll tweet it.
We'll tweet this out
Well,
and
this
let you know.
this selection, this choice is inside chapter. So I guess we will look at the bad ending, and then we load and continue on. But then between chapter 6 and chapter 7, there's another sub chapter that I'm just not sure if it's long or not, and if we should do it now or not. I guess we'll find out and keep you posted.
Yeah, we'll find out if it's too long or when we'll cut it. So, theories.
Yes, theories.
I mean, I think we know the big theory, right?
Yeah, and I agree now. I'm 100% in.
Yeah, I think Michel is trans.
Trans or something, yeah.
Intersex, at least. In the first story. And
gender nonconforming.
Yeah, exactly. Gender nonconforming in some way which was rejected at the time period and then becomes different things as it goes on.
AKA every possible way.
I'm still not sure if something was wrong with his body when he was born, or if he made a deal with the witch, which made him that way, but it can go.
Something weird gender-wise is going on.
Yes.
Yeah, and then do we think that Michel then is the white-haired girl?
He might be.
Could be. Yeah.
I think so.
I think being reincarnated, Michel keeps being reincarnated as the white-haired girl, yeah.
Oh, and keeps being ignored. Yes. I think, I'm in on Turbos. That is, it makes much more sense that Michel keeps being reincarnated as this white-haired girl, who I think Michel as a person was intended to be, and then just keeps being ignored and doesn't find out till the end. That seems like that would be a really good, whole plot line.
And I don't know if the maid is just the maid. I would also be inclined to wonder if the maid is actually other characters in the story, but she has removed herself as a separate actor, like, to avoid owning up to...
She's Jackofo!
If she's... Yeah, what if she's the boys?
She could totally be Jackofo! Just, they keep switching gender roles.
And, because we said, like, her personality is more like the non-white-haired girl female characters in the chapters as well, so, like, I'm really curious, like, I could buy that she was one of those other characters instead.
Pauline is really similar, is a really similar character, and then, yeah, there's aspects of her in Maria as well. And maybe a little bit in Ellie, but that's stretching it.
Yeah. I don't know. It's all strange. So, the fact that the maid was telling us these stories and then, like, she wasn't, like, she said she was present, but she wasn't present in the way that she said she was, like, it makes me think, like, maybe she was not present in any of like, she was present in those eras, but it was in a different way.
Oh, what do you think happened to her? I mean, we'll find out in the next chapter, but...
Well, they kind of alluded to it in the previous chapter where she made a deal with the witch that
that's much too simple. I mean, we're going to get a whole chapter about what's going on with Giselle after Michelle dies.
Yeah, probably what the witch actually did to them is obviously a lot more fucked up. Oh, now I'm thinking about those, like, crunchy bone sounds.
The zipping sounds.
And then who is the witch? What's going on with the witch herself?
I don't know. I don't know where that comes from.
Yeah, who is the witch? Who is Morgana? Is she really just, like, some other character? Is she a reflection? I think at this point she's a separate person.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, she's just a ghostly witch that, like, is the house.
Yeah, she wields power over the house, 100%.
But why does she hate everyone? We have no idea. That'll probably be the very last chapter of this game, even after we find out Michelle's backstory.
There's also the writing that Maria found in the third, that was in her own handwriting. Do you remember that? Or what's that all about?
Yeah, like, it's punish them, but punish the bloodline, but save me. What does that even mean? But then the whole thing was that the master of the house, their bloodline was halted. So, like, what does that have anything to do with Michelle and Giselle's love story to halt the bloodline? For either of them, because, like, Michelle has brothers, and Giselle is a woman, so, like, I don't...
She wasn't carrying on any bloodline anyway. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. There is a lot up in the air, which is, you know, they are carrying the narrative well. Because you should know at this point in the narrative. You should know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but overall, it was a really, just such a emotionally real, like, intimacy between these two characters that was really raw and real feeling and just very powerful, so.
But not scary. For a horror VN, the worst chapter. No, I'm joking, sorry.
I was very satisfied with this chapter because I left the last one with a lot of questions, and this one, actually, I think just adequately answered all of them.
Also, I wouldn't say it's not scary, because what's scarier than emotional vulnerability?
Oh, this is true. But I'm saying because yes, it is true.
Maybe the real horror was inside all of us after all.
The real horror is always inside of all of us, let's be honest. Yeah. But I mean, like, the big thing for me was like, I think that the fact that this chapter dealt with real emotional repercussions of significant trauma in a way that made sense to the narrative. Yeah. This is probably my favorite chapter. I think I enjoy this the most. Yeah. Which is good because it's like improving as we go. Other than the one chapter that was a little bit of a dip. I think this narrative is growing and it's very enjoyable.
I don't want to say it's satisfying. That's not the right word, but it's maybe refreshing even to see, like, heavy subject matter, like, handled, like, maybe not even just well, but, like, almost elegantly in a way. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it really, there usually, like, that stuff's brought up and it is just, like, a plot point kind of thing, but it almost feels like they were ready to, like, really work that into the story, and, like, felt like part of it. You know what I mean?
I think there's going to end up being a lot of parallels between Giselle's, like, the sexual violence that Giselle experienced and whatever violence Michelle has experienced. Like, I feel like they're being set up, like, the things that happened to Giselle seem very over the top and horrific, but it does make me wonder if once we find out what happened to Michelle, it will be more parallel.
Yeah. It seems like they were definitely identifying on, like, a deep level, which isn't obvious in the beginning. And, yeah. I'm really interested to see where it goes, because I think that's the big thing, is, like, this whole narrative doesn't take for granted people who have experienced significant trauma. Like, it lets you experience the recovery, even in a small sense, with them, which is it's refreshing, because you don't see that very often.
It's very compassionate and understanding to why people do horrible things.
Yep.
And yeah. And we said it earlier too, and usually it's like, love has cured me from that which ails me, and it's like, no, yeah.
Yeah, there's way too many stories where you get the rape and then you get the, like, oh, but I'm good now because you just loved me. You loved me out of that whole horrible experience and life-changing, awfulness.
And even Michelle is like, why would I think that would have happened? Like, he's like, that was stupid of me to even think that she could heal from this so quickly. And
then they even, I don't know if we brought it up, but they give the scene where right before the whole trauma thing. Oh, that's right. You did mention that. But the fact that they hint at like, she could be recovered, but no, she's not recovered. Like, that's such a great idea.
Yeah. It's very compassionate to Giselle. So yeah, things are probably gonna get more horrible from here.
Yeah.
Until next time, folks. Good luck.
Welcome back to Fata Morgana.
Good luck in that next week. That's not foreboding at all.
I wish we had like a cool door closing sound effect, like an old creaky door closing. That would be a good. Anyway, I would do that.
Tone, how about Fata Morgana?
have a nice Fata Morgana, you alright? See you next week, folks. Yeah.
Hey.
Good job.
Hey. Hopefully we get to see more titties, am I right?
Oh my god.
Take it easy.
Hey, Paul, you want some titties?
Tone, I don't get it. It's not like a movie. It's not like a video game. What is it? It's a visual fucking novel.
You read it left to right. What are you doing? No, you open it up this way. You read it back that way.
I'm imagining Tommaso and Jacopo having this conversation. Oh my god!
If y'all haven't seen the trending thing about the Sopranos reading manga, you need to go search that out on Twitter. It's real good.
It is, yeah.
All right.
So long, everybody.